Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome to my channel. Before I start today's video, I would just like to extend an apology to you guys for the sound quality in my previous video. I had a wrong setting in my OBS that I wasn't aware of, but I think I fixed it this time. So I guess we'll see. I mean, I'm not a sound recordist, so unfortunately, you know, my audio skills are a bit limited. I tried to fix it in Premiere, but, you know, my Premiere skills are also a little bit sort of shaky. Anyway, so in today's video, as you can see, I have two mirrors here, a handheld one and a freestanding one. And this is because I'm going to walk you guys through, essentially, how to use PBR in Second Life, not just for reflective surfaces, but also for generic basic texturing. So I'm going to, first of all, show you how I export these for both Second Life and Substance, because I export them differently. And then in Substance, how to import, and then I will briefly go over texturing. I mean, of course, there are other tutorials on YouTube on how to texture and stuff like that, but really, this video is more so about the settings and stuff like that. So then I'll also show you exporting and then importing into Second Life and setting up the reflective surface, etc. So to start off with, I have my two meshes in Blender and I've named them as I want them and I've assigned materials. Now, the reason I have the faces assigned a different material to the frames is because only the face is going to reflect the environment in Second Life, and I want to be able to set that separately from, you know, the frame. So, to export these, you go to File, Export, making sure you only have one selected, File, Export, and then collada.dae. I have a hotkey set Control Q. If you don't, it's very easy to set. You just go there, and you right click and then you can add a shortcut. Let me click on one that doesn't have one. You can see assign shortcut and then you just press the keys on your keyboard. So I'm going to press Control Q with my standing mirror selected, and I've made a folder called Meshes. And under Operator Presets, you want to select SL plus OpenSim Static. Generally speaking, I don't mess with these two because when you have Avastar installed, it basically has an export button that overrides needing to set this in here. So really, you're only ever going to work with this SL plus OpenSim static. And then you just save the collada. And I've already saved the two of them, so I don't need to go through that. But for Substance Painter, I learned this at school. Substance Painter prefers .fbx files. I don't know why, but I know that it reads them better than, for example, Collada. Now, I think part of the reason is because Collada's a little bit outdated. FBX is a newer file format, and it doesn't triangulate all of your faces. So when you export to Collada, whether you manually triangulate faces or not, it will triangulate them for you when you import into Second Life. And it does the same thing in Substance, and it can be really annoying. So to export to Substance, I select everything with Shift Select, and then I go to File, Export, FBX. Now, I, again, have a shortcut set here. And then under Textures, I save this, and I have an operator preset of Substance FBX Export. If you want to create a preset, you put your settings in here, and then you name it and press OK. So my settings, all that I really altered was selected objects and apply transform. Make sure that that's selected because otherwise it'll have like weird rotations. So anyway, then you save it. And now that all of that's saved, I'm going to open Substance and take it from there. Okay, so now that we're in Substance, I'm going to come up here to File, New. And you can see here under Template, there are all different options. Now, before the PBR update in Second Life, I was using the Unreal Engine one just because that's what I had it set to from school, because I had to do a lot of Unreal Engine projects there. But what you're now going to want to work with is this PBR Metallic Roughness, either Alpha Blend or Alpha Test. I prefer Alpha Blend just because of how things look in substance, but generally speaking, I don't... So let me explain it this way. If I had, for example, a plant and I wanted to texture it in substance, I would create the alpha texture for the leaves in Photoshop, and then I wouldn't have to deal with it in substance. So I would just ignore those planes in substance, or even import the plant pot without the leaves, just for baking's sake. So really, it doesn't matter between Alpha Blend and Alpha Test. You know, I've seen people argue for both, but if you're working with alpha planes for things like leaves and stuff like that, then it really doesn't matter. And most people aren't texturing hair in substance, they're just applying a base texture in, you know, Blender or whatever, and then using the same texture in Second Life. So I just set it to Alpha Blend, it doesn't really matter. Now by default, the document resolution is set to 1K. We have now been given the option to also upload in 2K. So if you want to do that, you can. I wouldn't recommend it because unless you're a Premium Plus member, it's quite expensive, but you can do it. Now, the reason I say you don't need to do it is because you can instead just upload your UV spread across more UV planes so that you have maybe 1 or 2 UV textures more, but it'll be the same resolution as 2K essentially, because instead of condensing everything into one texture, you have it spread out over a couple. Now, I used to not do this and my textures were quite crunchy, but now that I've started doing it, it really does make a big difference. The only time I would recommend exporting a texture in 2K is, for example, if you have a big build you're working on and you can't split one of the faces up, like a big exterior wall, then maybe export just that texture in 2K. But for the document resolution, you really only need to set it to 1K. Next, onto normal map format. If you're working in Windows, you will want to keep this on DirectX. If you're working on a Mac, you can set it to OpenGL. That's basically the difference. You really do not need to concern yourself with this. In fact, I would recommend just keeping it on DirectX. OpenGL was developed as a competitor to DirectX, so, you know, unless you're really into normal mapping and stuff and really complex normal maps, just leave it on DirectX. That's what I would recommend. And then for everything else, just leave it as is. And then here under File, you have to actually select your file. So I'm going to navigate to here, my textures, and I'm going to select the FBX file. And it'll load in, and then I can press OK. And then to move around in Substance, you press Alt and the middle mouse key. And then to rotate around, you press Alt and the left key. And to zoom out, it's Alt and the right key to dolly zoom. I mean, of course, you can zoom with the middle mouse, but it's not as precise. So, before I do any actual texturing, I need to bake my textures. And the reason for this, you may be thinking, well, with PBR, you don't need to do bakes. Wrong. In Substance Painter, you still do, because if I come over here to this button, Display Settings, and I go to Environment Map, I have one that's slightly different to the default one. It's basically just the default one set to black and white. If I press Shift and the right mouse button, I can rotate this. And what this is going to do with PBR is it's going to affect your specular map. It's going to affect how it reads gloss when your environment in Second Life rotates around it. So you are going to want to mess around with that. And in order to really see how it looks, you have to bake. So to do that, you come up here to Mode, Bake Mesh Maps, and you'll see that the output size matches the document size. Now, if you have one UV that, for example, has a big plane on it, then you might want to just individually go to that one and set it to 2K. But you can do that at the end when you're exporting. You don't necessarily need to do that here. For now, though, I'm going to set everything to 2K because I personally haven't experienced any texture crunchiness with the compression in Second Life. Second Life does compress from 2K to 1K quite well, because obviously it's used to people having done that for like a million years. So, dilation width, I always set this very low. And then all of this you only need to mess around with if you also have a high poly mesh. So, as you can see, my meshes are not really super dense with like the amount of topology. But if you had, for example, a dress and you had a low poly version and then you had a high poly ZBrush sculpt of it with wrinkles and seams and all of that, then what you would do is you would import, when you create the new file, you would import the low poly, and then here you would click on this button and go and search for your high poly mesh. Again, please use FBX format with them. A second best is OBJ, that's also a decent format. And then this max frontal distance and max rear distance, what this means is essentially when it reads the high poly bake, how far in front of the low poly is it reading and behind the low poly, as in how far in front of each face. And if you have wrinkles, obviously they protrude a little bit. So you may have to mess around with this a little bit if you're doing that. For anti-aliasing, if your PC can handle it, maybe go to super sampling ×4. I tend to leave anti-aliasing on none. And then match, you can set it to by mesh name if you've named them exactly the same, but only the ending is different. Like if you have lots of different objects. So like if I had named this mirror.handheld_low, and this is mirror.standing_low, and then you had the same but _high, then it would know to read them by mesh name. So I would always set it to by mesh name. And then here you can, if you use a different ending to _low or underscore high, then you would change that here, although _low and _high are the industry standards. Anyway, for this mesh, I don't need to focus on this. And then for these mesh map bakers, you don't really need to mess with these particularly. I keep them just on, what's done by default here. The ID, I would say, is optional. Unless you have a lot of objects, then basically what the ID does is, if you're coming in from Maya, you can set the ID separately to the textures. But in Blender, it reads the textures as the IDs. So here, if I make this a little bit bigger, you can see these are my textured names. Matte frame handheld, matte frame standing, matte mirror handheld, and matte mirror standing. If you assign each of these a different color in Blender, it'll take those colors as the ID, which can be useful if you have a mesh with lots of little faces that are difficult to select. Then when you go to select faces for masking, you can select by ID instead of by face, like manually, and it can be helpful. I have worked with it in the past, but not very often. Usually I just manually select. So ID is optional, but I'm just going to leave it on whatever it's on. So now that I've applied all my settings, I'm going to bake selected textures, and you'll see it's just going through and baking each of these that you have selected. Obviously, the more you have selected, the longer it will take, which is also why I always say, leave it on the standard. You don't really need opacity or height. You can set that manually as you're, texturing. So, really I wouldn't focus too heavily on this over here. And now, as you can see, as it's finishing each of the bakes, the images are appearing here. And they will also appear in your project panel. So now that it's done baking, I can return to painting mode. And you'll see that here under project, if I uncheck that filter, here are all my bakes. Now, I'm not really going to use these because, as I said, because we baked, it's, done its own thing. But what I am going to do is I'm now just going to go through and do some basic texturing. I'm not going to specifically texture the mirror surfaces because we're going to work on that in Second Life. So actually I can just hide these for now. And you'll see, you can't see them anymore. So I'm just going to go through and texture, and I'll be right back afterwards. Okay, so as you can see, I've just gone for a simple gradient and like a high gloss kind of finish. Oh, I forgot to do that. Hang on. I knew there was something. Let me add it into this mask. Yes, that's fine. Do I want this gradient here? I'll just duplicate this outside of here and just quickly mask that in. Or do I want it in pink? Decisions. No, I don't like that. I will take this and take this outside and remove that. Black mask. Here we go. Yes, I like that. Okay, whatever. Sorry about that. So, now I can unhide these. And we're ready to export. Now, again, here I have a custom shortcut set up, Control-Q. But if you don't, you go to File, Export Textures. And now, as you can see, this menu comes up. I'm just going to navigate quickly to my folder, sorry. Where do I have it? Here. Ooh, oh my god, I just saw there's a spider moving along my wall. Oh my god. Oh my god. That's horrendous. Stop moving! Oh my god, okay, sorry about that. And then I'm going to go to New Folder Bakes. This is just, you know, stuff I learned at school, and they drilled it into my head, so I still tried to stick with the system. With the PBR, you probably won't need to separate bakes from textures. Textures, for me, is where I go in Photoshop and fix stuff up and, you know, prepare it for import into Second Life. But generally, with this PBR thus far, I've been finding that I haven't needed to, you know, make any edits. But, nevertheless, I'm going to put it in my bakes folder. So select folder. Under output template, you're going to want to go to GLTF PBR metallic roughness. And this is just because this also exports a material, which is basically, the way you can think of materials, is it's like a little folder that encompasses the metallic, the roughness, and the base texture all in one, and it knows how to read them of its own accord. You don't have to tell it. And with this new PBR update, you're going to be wanting to import materials rather than the textures individually. And I've looked up how to do it, so I'll try to explain it as best as I can. Anyway, then here, under size, again, here you can set it based on each texture set's size. So, for example, if I wanted to set it to 1K, but then over here, I wanted to individually set this to a different size. Then you'd click on this, and you'd set it to a different size. So this is what I meant earlier about individually changing them. And then for padding, again, because I'm not working with any alphas, I just set it to dilation infinite. If you set it to dilation plus transparent, you can set the dilation around each bake. I usually go between 4 and 5. But yes, for now I'm just going to go dilation infinite. And then you can export. And there we go. So I'm going to save my project quickly, and then I'm going to load into the beta grid and take it from there. So now that I am on the beta grid, I can upload both my meshes and my textures. I'm going to start out with my meshes, and it's fairly straightforward with these two meshes because they're fairly low poly. Well, I tried to keep them fairly low poly, so I will start out with the standing mirror. And as you can see, there are these 4 values. So the highest one, this high, is generally what people will see. And then the other 3 are levels of detail, which, if any of you play The Sims, a similar thing happens there when, as you zoom out from an object, it becomes lower quality, obviously. And this is determined through these 3. Now, generally speaking, you won't ever see the lowest one, so I just always set that to 0, and that will help hugely with your both upload fees and your land impact. This low one I generally don't mess around with because this is from when you're really, really far away. The medium one, if it looks good, I leave it as is under the, generate auto option. But if it doesn't look that great, I'll either bump it up just a little bit here until you see kind of a noticeable change. Or if that's not good enough for what I'm wanting, I will just use the LOD above. And then it will use the highest poly version. Now, I might in the future do an in-depth mesh uploading tutorial because there's quite a lot that can go into it depending on what you're uploading. But with just generic sort of stationary props like this, it's not that, complicated. And then if I move over to the physics tab, really all we mess with is this. So I always just set it to cube, unless, you're building like a skybox or something like that, in which case you will probably have made your own physics. Or if you're doing something complex that requires a little bit of finagling. But cube, basically what it does is it just goes to the outermost points of the mesh and it just makes a cube there to just encompass the whole thing. If your mesh is really complex, you can click Analyze. You generally don't need to, though. So, coming back over to level of detail, I will see what land impact it pumps out with using the high LOD for medium as well. If it's too high for my liking, I will go back to generate auto, though. So, let's have a look. 10 land impact from mirror, that's a little bit extreme. So, I'm going to go to generate auto again and see what it does. And maybe I can bump this down a little bit. There we go. Just a tiny little bit. It doesn't look that much different. 5 land impact, that's a lot more sort of acceptable. So I'm going to upload that. There we go. And I'm just going to res that out. And you can see it's rotated, and I'll get to that in a minute once I get to the projection orb thing for the reflections for the mirror. But first I'm going to also upload the handheld model. Here we go. And with handheld models, the LODs, these 3 generally don't matter that much, so I just put that one on 0 for the upload costs. Physics, you don't really need to set them if it's purely going to be handheld, but for me, with stuff like this, I like to also add physics just in case people want to res it out as decor. Because a lot of people have handheld mirrors in real life that they might just leave on a vanity table somewhere. So, yes. I will see what the weights and feet are just with the generate auto. That's pretty low, so I can probably use LOD above. Yes, that should be fine. So, upload that. And now I'm going to res that out as well. And now I am going to rotate these after I've set up the reflection sphere thing, because it can be a little bit convoluted. So essentially the problem with these reflection probes is that for some reason, by default, they don't reflect correctly, is I guess the best way I can put it. And so you have to rotate them along the z-axis forward. So I'll show you what I mean. So if I Resiprin, and I will just quickly tint the Z face. So the Z axis is the one that faces up. And for some reason, it never reflects properly if you just set it to reflective just like that. So what you have to do is you have to rotate it so that that Z face is facing forwards. So whatever direction your mirror is facing in, this has to face in as well. Now, obviously, if you're trying to make, I don't know, a reflective sphere, that would work slightly differently. But just for like normal mirrors and stuff, you have to rotate it as shown here. So I'm going to delete this for now and walk you through the materials. So I made an oopsie in Substance Painter when I was exporting. I exported these mirror faces as well. And I didn't need to, because we can set those to be reflective just using the in-game, I guess, texture options available. So I don't need to upload that material. But for the other two, I will show you how to upload those. So you go to Build, Upload, and instead of Image or Bulk, I'm going to come to Material, because both the Bulk and the Solo Material upload options are under Material. So if I navigate over to my Bakes folder, you can see that it only shows these two. However, if I bring over my actual folder, you can see that it has all the individual materials as well. Now, the reason that this is only showing these two is because these are GLTF and GLB files, which, as explained previously, are basically like a folder just like this one, or, you know, any of these, and it reads the textures inside of it. So I'm going to click on the GLTF one because that's, I guess, more of an industry standard than GLB. So I, you know, prefer to work with that. And I'm just going to select Open. And now because I have multiple objects, each with their own material, it's going to ask me which material I want to upload. Now, as you can see, you can bulk upload all. However, I'm going to upload just one at a time, just to show you the menu that pops up when you upload a single material, because that menu doesn't pop up if you select bulk upload. So I'm going to select the frame for the standing mirror and select OK. And it'll show you all of this. Now, you can set your default settings for this in here. So, for example, I know that I don't want this object to be alphaed. I want it to be opaque. So here under alpha mode, I'm just going to set it to opaque, which is the same as alpha none in the Blin Fong menu. And then I'm not going to select double-sided now. I'm going to show you it later when I apply the material to the mesh and add the mirrored sort of reflective plane, because you will see that whilst the difference isn't huge, it does make a difference for the, I guess, reflection integrity, if you will. It's a little bit more convincing. So yes, with this set how I like it, I will just select Save. And it costs 40 lindens because it has to upload each texture individually. But then if I come over here to materials, you'll see it's here. Now, I've already test uploaded these before, so I can delete those. And now I will upload the handheld mirror as well. So let me go to material again. And this one. And select handheld. Okay. And again, I'm just going to set this to alpha mode opaque, just because it's really annoying. Or actually, this one, you know what? This one I'll save as blend, and I'll show you what it looks like when you upload it, and it looks really stupid. Now, you can always go into that menu just by double-clicking your material and change settings and save them again. But just sometimes it can be easier to change those settings as you're uploading if you know what you want to do already. So, now with my materials uploaded, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove these colors that by default upload with the objects. Now, the reason these upload is because, again, I assigned the materials colors in Blender, so it's carried these across as kind of like IDs. So I'm just going to set the tint to just plain white. And all of this is under the Blend Fong tab. Under PBR, this is where we're going to be working for the materials. So I'm going to just select the mirror and then select face and just the face of the frame. And then I'm going to drag over matte frame standing. And you can actually rename these. I find these long names really annoying. So I'm just going to rename these quickly. I like having PBR in the front, although, I mean, it's a material, so technically you should know that it's PBR anyway. But anyway, I'm going to just drag the standing one here into material. Or you can just drag it directly onto the object itself, which I'll show with the handheld. Let me zoom into it. And remember, this is the one that I didn't set alpha to opaque. So I will just drag this onto the material, onto the object, sorry. And now let me see if I can show you the alpha problems. Here we go. You can see that it's alphaing out the heart because it's the same material slot. So to fix this, I just go into here and set this to opaque and save. And then if it doesn't auto update, you just go here and opaque and, oh, I guess I don't need to save. Anyway, there we go. So now you may be looking at these materials and thinking, oh, well, you know, they look a little bit dull, a little bit boring. And that is because now with PBR, it's dependent on your wind light, or at least a lot more dependent on your wind light. So if I open my quick preferences and I go to personal lighting, and let me just move this out of the way, and I just play around with this, you can see that if I position the lighting better, it's a lot more attractive, it's a lot more flattering. And unfortunately, this is something that, you know, we have to learn with PBIs, how to position the wind lights better so that everything is slightly more flattering. Now, I'm not going to focus on that just yet, because I still have these rotated away from my avatar. But what I am going to do is I'm going to set the mirror faces to be reflective of the environment. And you have to do this step before you add in your mirror probe, because it can be a little bit difficult to click through it, because it essentially has to be bigger than your object that you're wanting to reflect, just because of how, I guess, Second Life has configured it. I don't know. They've done some strange things with it, which I'll show you in a second. But for now, I'm just going to right-click Edit, and I can actually select both faces with Shift, because I'm going to do the exact same thing to both of them. And here under Material, I'm just going to select Blank. And under Base Color, I'm also going to select Blank. Normal and Emissive you don't really need. And then here under Roughness, all the way up to 1 roughness means fully rough, so no reflection. So if I set this to 0, it's going to be fully reflective. And there you go. So you can see it's reflecting everything properly now as it should. But if I just briefly move this back behind my avatar, you can see that it's not reflecting her yet. And that's because we haven't added the reflection probe yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the position of my mirror, and that's going to make it a bit easier for me to position the reflection sphere afterwards. So to create the reflection sphere, again, I'm going to right-click, create, just create a basic square. And remember, you have to rotate it so that the Z-axis, or the top face, faces forwards. And then I'm going to press P, the big uppercase P, to paste the location. And now I'm going to try as best as possible to match the rotation to this face. Now, you don't have to do this, but as far as sizing goes, I just find that it's a little bit less tedious with it matching as closely as possible to your object. Because if you, for example, were to res this mirror in a room with other items that have maybe low roughness applied to them, so they're fully shiny, and you were to res it really close to that object, if your reflection sphere is big enough, it might encompass that other object and accidentally turn it reflective, like mirrored. So I like to keep it as close to the actual object's shape as possible. Here we go. And then I'm just going to scale this using stretch both sides, just to encompass the mirror. It doesn't need to be perfect, because again, only the face is supposed to be reflective, but it just needs to sort of encompass it. And now once that's done, we have to come over here to select reflection probes so that when I exit out of the edit menu, if I decide, oh, I've made a mistake, I can just right click and edit it. And another place you can select that is here under build, options, select reflection probes. So now we can come over here to features and we can enable reflection probe. And you may be looking at this and thinking, oh, that looks messed up. And it does. Don't worry, we can fix it. Here under probe update, you need to set this from static to mirror everything. Either mirror, oh, as I was about to say, either mirror everything or dynamic, because mirror everything can make you crash. So yes, I will get that working again and be right back. Okay, we're back in business. I'm so sorry about that. That was really awkward, but as you can see, it kept the reflection probe. And it's still set to mirror everything. You can, of course, set it to mirror dynamic, and then that kind of... It can mess up a bit, but basically it's like a less laggy version of mirror everything. But I'm going to keep it on everything, and as you can see, it's, well, reflecting everything. You can see, hang on, let me link it quickly and move it behind my avatar. Da 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 da! You can see her! And I have my reflections set to every second frame because I just don't want my computer crashing all the time with every frame. You can, of course, have it lower if you're just taking pictures. But for this tutorial's sake, I set it to every second frame so it's not absolutely insufferable to look at. So you may notice the reflection's a little bit janky. It's not 100% close up. I haven't really found a solution for that. That's kind of just how it is, I guess. It's not, you know, the sharpest of all the mirror tools I've seen in all the games I've played. But it's a new feature and I'm hoping that they will eventually update it. But now you can see why I set the mesh of the mirror to be double-sided. Because if I come over here to texture and I... Oh, I thought I had this set to double-sided. Well, anyway, if you set it to double-sided, it makes it a little bit more realistic, basically. But yes, now what you can also see just slightly, let me put it over the grass so you can see it better, is this weirdness here. And this is because I've made the mirror too small, essentially. So I have to make it a little bit bigger to get rid of this. And it's really weird, and I don't know why it does it. It's something to do with, is it called tessellation? I can't remember what the word is, but basically the warping at the edge of a mirror, kind of like what happens when you look into a glass. It's kind of like that sort of a thing. I don't know why it's happening on flat surfaces in Second Life, but I think that's something they have to sort out. But yes, it's, as I said, you know, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's what we've got. So, you know, it's better than nothing. Anyway, now I can rotate the mirror because they're linked. And by the way, if you are going to be creating resible meshes, always make sure under features to switch them from convex hull to prim. Prim basically, I mean, in this mesh it's not that important because I've set the physics to just be a big square around the whole thing. But especially if you're doing a skybox or something that's walkable, you do not want to have your physics model set to convex hull, because convex hull only reads the outside. It doesn't read the intricacies on the inside. So if you do want something that's climbable, walkable, whatever, always make sure to set it to prim. Anyway, more on that if I do a more detailed uploading and physics tutorial. So now I can work on the mirror, the little handheld one. I'm going to select face and just switch to prim and just select double-sided here. And now again, I'm going to create my little reflection probe. I'm going to copy the location of my mirror and paste it and just scale it down just so I can see what I'm doing. And thankfully this one I don't need to rotate because it's just straight. Here we go. And now, oh goodness, no, I forgot to rotate it. See, a prime example. Rotate along the z-axis. Here we go. So, now I can resize it. Oh, hang on. Sorry about that. Today is definitely a brain fog day. There we go. And this side, and here we go. So now I can go to Features, Reflection Probe, Static set to Everything, and Shift select the original mesh and link. And now let me just make sure again that this is set to double-sided. Yes. Okay. So as you can see, again, it's not the best mirror you've ever seen as far as the the glitchiness and all of that, but it's what we've got. So I'm just going to scale this up a little bit. Now thankfully these default prims only take up one land impact, and I think everyone can handle that. So I am going to actually take a copy of this to my inventory and just attach it to my avatar to check that it reflects when she's holding it. And also what you'll notice is that if, I don't know if I'm going to crash doing this. Well, I'll give it a go. If you have two mirrors, generally speaking, only one of them will be properly reflective. I don't know why. I think it's to save on lag, but it's just something I've noticed. So if you see that in your browser, in your viewer, and you're thinking, oh my god, what have I done wrong? Don't worry, I'm pretty sure it's intentional. So, now going to my objects, I'm going to attach this to her right hand. And again, you can see it's gone strange with the mirror behind her, but we can definitely see that even attached to her, it's reflecting. I mean, it's obviously attached a bit too big, but that's besides the point. So, that essentially concludes the tutorial. Now, of course, if you're, taking pictures and everything, do make sure that you are zoomed in enough, because the more you zoom out, the more the mirror is going to screw up, essentially. If you are playing around with taking pictures, make sure to set the lighting in a desirable way, I suppose. And yes, that's basically it for the mirrors. If anything was, explained badly or hard to understand or something like that, or if you have just general questions or concerns, then please do feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I will get back to all of them as soon as possible. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!